Okay. And whenever you're ready.
Well, I think I'm ready. I'm now going to try to share my screen. It says I cannot share my screen. Okay. Well, that's a
Now you
bummer.
can. I stopped.
Oh, all right. Thank you. That's helpful. Okay. All right. That's better. Um, okay. Well, welcome everybody. Um, Today we're going to be covering really just a slice of team science. And when we get started, I'll try to give you a little bit of background to help you better understand the context that we are doing this in. Um, the focus today really is going to be on communication. It's certainly, we operate in a situation where communication really is key. Sometimes we're good at it, sometimes we are not so good at it, but it's really critical for everybody getting done what needs to be done in their jobs, and particularly now where a lot of what we're doing is being done virtually, it's particularly challenging. So we're going to spend a little time in that space. The link that Stephanie and Angela have put out on both the initial welcome slide and in the chat is to an assessment tool that we use quite a bit around communication styles. So during the first couple slides, as I'm going through this, if you haven't already completed that, go ahead and go to the link and complete the assessment and write down the numbers associated with all four of your colors. We're going to ask you for your dominant color a little bit later, but I think it's helpful to you all if you can see all the different colors and what your scores are in each of those spaces. So right now, before we get too much further, I'm going to ask um, Elizabeth Kopras, who goes by Cope, and Angela, who goes by Angela, and Stephanie, who goes by Stephanie, to all introduce themselves so you know who you're going to be dealing with today. Cope?
Hi, I'm Elizabeth Kopras. I'm a senior research associate in pulmonary at UC, and I've been participating in clinical research since 1992. I hope that some of the communication strategies that have helped me here will help you as well.
Okay, Angela?
Hi there, I'm Angela Mendell. I am a program manager in the Center for Improvement Science, so I work with our fearless leader here, Jack. I have a background in clinical research and basic science as well, and Cope is too humble to admit it, but she just recently won an award for the best CRP at UC. And I think maybe Jack might have a little more details than I do on that, but she's pretty awesome. So, Stephanie?
Hi, I'm Stephanie Schuckman. I'm just like Angela, but over at the UC side. We're both at UC, but my experience is more at the UC side. And I'm not a clinical research professional by trade. I started my career as a stockbroker. However, I am an educational researcher now. So I just finished my master's in 2019. So I am very grateful to be part of this team science team and with these lovely people, Cope, Jack, and all of the ones that you see here. So we do a lot of different team science workshops for everything you can think of and under the sun when it comes to anything teams, which all of us have to do these days. So welcome and let's have some fun.
And I just want to break in really quick. There's been some questions about the survey, and I just wanted to let you know that it is a matrix. So with each set of 4 questions has to be either a 1, a 3, a 5, or a 7. You can't have any duplicates for each group. And there's a reason for that for the scoring. So please let me know if that does not work.
Okay. All right. Well, with that, there are a number of people that are not participating today, but have been helpful in putting together not only this workshop, but all of our team science workshops. Um, as was mentioned, I'm Jack Kues. I'm the Associate Dean for Continuous Professional Development in the College of Medicine. I'm a social psychologist, and I head up the Center for Improvement Science, where we do not only all of the team science training, but the lion's share of all of the consultations with individuals and teams that are trying to improve their performance or get new teams started. So as you can see, it's quite a diverse group. We have people who are researchers. We have people who are clinicians. We have people who you may know. We have people who are educators, nurses, basic scientists. We are truly an eclectic group. What brought us together was both our experiences and interest in a number of people here have had a little bit more formal training in the team science area. So with that, I will get moving so that we can get to some of the details. So we're going to cover a couple things today. I do want to spend just a bit of time up front talking a little bit about sort of the background of team science and the value in working with teams. And then we're going to shift gears a little bit and get into the specifics of what you're doing now, which is your communication preference. We're going to be covering a number of vignettes that illustrate how these different communication styles work together or do not work together, as the case may be, in different real situations. And then we're going to end up talking a little bit about some strategies for being able to bridge the gaps between communication styles that are very different and often result in not only miscommunication, but often some problems between individuals that can be very disruptive to getting the work done for everybody involved. So we're going to try to give you some practical suggestions and some models to work on at the end. So with that, I just want to say that we're going to cover just a couple of real quick definitions so you have some idea what's going on. The term team science gets kicked around quite a bit. Everybody uses it. And my experience has been most of the people using it really don't understand it. So generally what we talk about is team science it's a collaborative effort that is used to address different challenges, whether they be clinical research or other kinds of scientific challenges that really use the skills, the strengths, the talents, the diversity of different professionals or professionals from different fields. So the things that are key here is team science is really centered on people from different disciplines or different experiences coming together to solve challenging problems in a collaborative way. More recently, as teams have become sort of a focus of not only research, but a lot of other activities, clinical activities, as well as teaching activities, a relatively new, I would say, the concept of the science of team science is less than 10 years old. I remember going to some of the very first meetings. They didn't call it this. Somebody hit upon this title, and we've been using it ever since. But as you can see, the definition only goes back to 2013. But basically, it is a new field that really has been looking at how we work as teams and developing strategies, tools, exercises, other interventions that help promote the effectiveness of teams. One of the things that I do generally in a lot of our workshops is to ask people what percentage of the teams they're on they would consider to be really effective. And typically it turns out to be somewhere just about half. So whether you're a glass half full kind of person or a glass half empty kind of person, you're either working really well half of the time or really poorly half of the time. So take your pick wherever you happen to be. This whole science of team science thing covers a lot of stuff, but we generally live in this pink area, sort of what referred to as the nuts and bolts. So what we have been doing, my team has been doing in CIS, is we really look at how teams are structured and the context in which they work, and then we work on some of the skills that they have or do not have and can improve, and how the teams function within the environment that they're working on. So, you know, I'm guessing you all on a daily basis have some challenging interactions, have some things that don't go very well, and have some people whose necks you would like to wring from time to time. So, yeah, without sort of divulging too much detail about your work lives, this is pretty typical. Um, Work with a team, particularly when you've got a complex activity that you're engaged in, is very challenging, and often there are cross purposes, there's mixed messages, there are things that aren't being done very well that are challenges to you, make your life more difficult. And when we start looking at these things, we find not huge dysfunctions, but some dysfunctions about the way teams are set up, the way they work. And we often will find ourselves working with teams to help them themselves overcome some of these so that they can work with a little less stress. So, what's the big deal and why should you care? Um, so, I had talked about half of the teams not being very functional and the discomfort that you feel on a regular basis. But a lot of the stress that we feel, and one of the other things that I spend some of my time focusing on is burnout. And burnout right now, particularly in the middle of COVID, is really very high. People are feeling particularly stressed, and that the burnout and turnover in areas is very high. And actually, your area uh, and the CRP area, turnover is relatively high in a lot of those areas, not just here, but nationally. And a lot of that is because of the stress and problems that people face on a daily basis. So we do know that that's out there, and we're hoping that some of the things that we can cover today can be helpful to you. So we're going to talk primarily today about communication. It's one of many workshops that we give, and I'll cover some other workshops later on. But we spend a lot of time helping people understand their preferences, the preferences of people around them, how they work in a complementary way, how they work in how they can be stressful, working with people with very different styles from you. So we are going to spend some time sort of getting into the details of how miscommunication happens and how you might be able to structure yourself or work with the people around you in a way that reduces that as much as possible. So here's an excellent example of miscommunication. Seems straightforward. You know, when I nod my head, I want you to hit it. So take your pick. The other thing that I want to just mention parenthetically, particularly as we are working more and more virtually, we are spending less and less time face to face, depending on your work situation and your responsibilities. One of the things you should know is that when we communicate with one another, it's on several channels. And uh, more than half of that has nothing to do with what we are doing verbally. So we have all sat in rooms and we've had conversations where you're looking at the other person and it doesn't matter what they're saying, you know what they're thinking. And sometimes they don't say anything and you know what they're thinking. And oftentimes when you're talking, people know what you're really thinking. So what happens when you take that channel away? Well, then you don't always know what they're thinking, and you can't interpret that. You can't put it all together. And in fact, spoken words, if you look at all the channels we use for communicating, spoken words are only about 7% of what we are communicating. So think of the areas where we only use spoken words or written words, which is emails. And so think about this. So text messaging, there are lots and lots and lots of comical stories about miscommunication using text messaging, whether it's autocorrect or emojis or any number of things. So we struggle. And in fact, the whole concept of emojis came into play because text messages have no emotions. And so often when you say something, when you type something in a text and you want to make sure the person on the other end understands what you really mean, what do? We add emojis. So we have been trying along the way to do the best we can to expand the limited channels that we are using right now. So if it's only spoken words or typed words, we are looking to do other things as a way of filling in what is missing in those channels. So I'm going to turn it over to Cope now, and she's going to move into what you've been doing and completing that inventory. We generally refer to as colors, but it's a communication channel that allows you to better understand your preference for how you communicate with other people, and also to understand those of other people. So with that, Cope, it's all yours.
Okay, Stephanie, will you be advancing the slides?
Yes, I
Assume-
am. I
Okay,
am,
thank you.
and doing the polls, no problem.
All right, just wanted to make sure I was moving slowly or smoothly. Okay, so we've talked a little bit about communication breakdown and team dysfunction. We want to spend a little time now focusing on communication styles, and hopefully we'll gain some insights into how you can adjust your communication depending on the people you're trying to talk with. So at the beginning of the workshop, there was a link to the REDCap survey. I hope everybody got it to work. If you've completed the survey, your results at the bottom of the report will give you numbers for which communication colors are primary for you. Next slide. So what do we mean by communication colors? Well, there are strategies or styles of communicating. So with my personal experience is that it really helps me be a better team member if I can consider the impact that my communication style might have on other people. It helps me work better with people if I try to understand their styles. I think it should be made clear that everybody's actually a mixture of these communication styles. Nobody's all blue or all red, but most of us have a dominant type. Hopefully the survey gave you scores for blue, yellow, green, and red. People who score higher in blue or green, as you can see on this figure, they tend to be more oriented by task. And the people who are yellow or red tend to be more, they tend to approach issues more through relationships. Next slide, please. So we should have our first poll up, and we're going to ask you, did you get the poll up there? Sorry, I'm not very good at this. Which color for you had the highest score?
Sorry, everyone. I'm trying to launch the poll. It's giving me another error.
Oh, okay. Well, we don't need to actually run the poll. Just think to yourself what colors had the highest score. And like I said before, again, people are a blend of styles. So some of you might not have a really prominent score for one color. I tend to really test blue. Did she get that to work? No.
Okay, so people are putting their colors in the chat, yes. And that's very helpful.
Yeah, go ahead, put them in.
Excellent.
Thanks for being flexible, everybody. Wow, look at that.
Okay, go ahead to the next screen, Stephanie. While we're looking at our different colors, we're going to go ahead and talk about what are some of the attributes of these communication styles. So like I said, I am pretty blue. Go ahead to the next slide, please, Stephanie. And blue people tend to be logical and analytical, bottom line. We like facts. We like timelines. We tend to get impatient. We tend to be kind of results oriented. When I'm in a business meeting, I want to figure out what are we trying to solve? How are we going to solve it? How do we move on? We do tend to be a little bit outspoken as well. Next slide, Stephanie, please. In the workplace, we can appear rushed and abrupt. I have to make a conscious effort, knowing my communication styles, to not be rude, because I can get very focused and it could come off as mean or nasty, and I don't ever want to be that way. So knowing my communication style helps me adjust the way I communicate with people so that I don't hurt their feelings easily. We can be a little bit hard-nosed, as you can see on the slide. We like to get to the point quickly. We can get frustrated sometimes when people go off on their side conversations, and I want people to focus on what we're doing right here. We tend to prefer logic rather than gut. Next slide, Stephanie. How do you communicate with a blue? Well, it helps to be direct, to the point. We do like some freedom of choice. You want to discuss how the results will be accomplished, and are you using facts and data? Or are you talking to me about your feelings? Because I don't want to deal with your feelings right now. I want to know what the data is. And does your communication style show some kind of clear analysis that I can follow? Next slide, Stephanie. This is an overview of somebody who scored higher on the green scale. Next slide. So as you can see from the slide, that greens tend to be detail-oriented, systematic and structured, organized and analytical. In general, they tend to be more on time, accurate. They like things neat. They like the protocols to be written out appropriately. They can be perfectionists and critical of others. Next slide, Stephanie. It says here that they tend to be the most private of all the styles, weighing facts and supporting data. They value following orders. They understand that time costs money. They have a well-organized office. As you can tell, I am not a green at all. Okay. But I like to say, you know, before I studied these communication styles, I used to get really frustrated by the green people on my team. I always felt like they got bogged down in the details. I didn't feel like they saw the big picture. Sometimes I thought they were actually putting up impediments to progress of the project because they wanted all these details and everything spelled out. But after I studied communication styles and started to look and try to understand how people looked at things differently from me, I came to actually value my green people a lot, because while I'm really broad brush and focused on the overall project, my green team members keep us organized. They never guess at data. They always fill out the forms accurately. So this is how I feel addressing communication styles has been helpful to me and my team. Next slide, Stephanie. How do you coordinate? Stephanie, next slide, please. Oh, there you go. So how do you coordinate with greens? Well, you want to give them the facts, show it to them in writing. When I'm working with greens, I want to make sure that I review the protocol with them. They have no questions, that I go over the case report forms and make sure that they get to review REDCap with me. I don't just say, hey, go look at REDCap and figure it out. They want things to be in order and neat and appropriate format. I believe Angela is going to go over the reds and yellows. Angela, it's off to you.
That's right. So Copes covered the blue and green communication styles. They're the task-oriented group. Full disclosure, my communication style preference is red. So I'm going to cover red first. Next slide, please. So red communicators are very people focused. They're very oriented on folks, and they feel like people are the most important part of a workplace. They tend to be really friendly, very sympathetic to others, and they're genuinely concerned about others and how others are doing. They really value harmonious relationships. And they're focused on building relationships in the workplace. So because of that, they may have a little bit of difficulty standing up for themselves and tend to avoid conflict because they really value everything being harmonious and making sure everybody's comfortable and happy. Next slide, please.
Before we move forward, it looks like Jamie has a question.
Sure.
Jamie, do you want me to unmute yourself or unmute you?
Feel free to either put it in the chat or
yeah, I see your hand up.
Either way, Jamie. Or
okay.
No question.
Yep, I would love to hear the comment if there's a comment here.
I know I asked her to unmute, but okay.
Maybe
Thanks,
she's
Jamie.
just too red.
All right. Okay.
It's just too red.
Hey, that's right. So reds tend to blend really well with other styles because they are very relationship based and they care about other people so much. They, as I said before, they consider people as the most important asset of a company. In the workplace, they tend to be really friendly and they have an open door policy. And that they tend to be known as the office counselor, which can be a detriment to them because they tend to care more about making sure everybody feels okay than they do about themselves. And then the other thing is they really like to make sure that everybody approaches, problems in a really sensitive way. So how do we communicate with a red person, a red communicator? That's the next slide, please. In the workplace, if you are a different color. So they really appreciate the calm, cool, and collected style. That goes back to the harmonious relationships. Ask them for their help because that's what red communicators, they care a lot about people. So ask them for their help because they would love to help you. Preferably not at the last minute. And that goes back to being considerate of others. So be considerate of their schedule. They'll appreciate that. Some of the things you might want to ask yourself if you're putting together an email or you're going to approach somebody that you think is a red communicator, is what you're talking about, does it consider the personal aspect of things? Is it user friendly? Does it acknowledge and deal with emotional issues? Because those are the types of things that will be important to a red communicator. So let's move on to yellow. My second score, highest score is yellow, but I'm definitely mostly red. Yellows, next slide, please. People that communicate, they prefer the yellow communication style. They are also relationship oriented. They're a little more energetic and intuitive. They like adventure more than reds, perhaps. Some of the things that you might hear is let's just give it a try. The yellow communicators really like to experiment with things and just see what happens. They're energetic, they're animated, they're spontaneous. They're typically the person that is talking the most and building relationships quite a bit. They're like the fun person to be around. They love to have new ideas, and but the downfall to that is sometimes because they're so forward looking and they're so excited about the new ideas and they're ready to go and try them all. They may tend to overlook some details. So next slide, please. Which is where green communicators could really be helpful to reds, just like Cope said with blues. Again, they're the most talkative of all the styles. One of the things that yellows may have a little bit of difficulty listening to directives or to concerns because they're developing rapport with people and building relationships. And they're talking to people, so they may not quite catch everything that's being said. It's normal for them to try out several approaches at once. That's the love of experimentation and adventure. They do tend to see into the future, so they have they're really holistic based. So they see the big picture and they look pretty far in the future when they're thinking about problems. And next slide, let's talk about how to communicate with yellows effectively. All right, so as I said before, they're really creative and they love to share ideas with everybody. So when you're communicating with a yellow communicator, show your interest and interact, because the way that yellow communicators do their best idea building and coming up with concepts and things is to talk through it. So they want your input, they want you to interact with them, they want to build on each other's ideas and come up with something really cool. Ask yourself, is what you're going to talk to them about, is it going to look at the big picture? Because that's something that they'll be thinking about. Is it conceptually sound? Is it colorful and visual and something that's really, exciting? And does it look into the future? So those are just a few things for communicating with yellow communicators. Next slide, please. So we've done a little bit of an overview of all four of the different colors. Hopefully you'll have something we've said will have struck a chord with you. What we're going to do next is we're going to run through a couple of different vignettes of just conversations that are everyday conversations. What I'd like you to do is think about what color each person represents and which color, which person you identify the most with, And think about while we're running through it, because we are going to ask you when we're finished, think about how could this conversation be different if those people understood that the other person's color, it's just a communication style. How could their conversation be a bit different? So think about that as Cope and I run through these vignettes. Next slide.
So Angela, before we get into the vignettes, I just want to point out, I did a little calculating. We are roughly half green and half red, with a very, very small smattering of blues and yellows. So we have just really, as near as I could tell, we had one of each. But we are equally divided between greens and reds. And I just want to make one more comment, and then I'll turn it back over to you. And that is, so does this mean, if you woke up this morning as a green, that you will be a green the rest of your life and you've always been green? The answer is no. There's a certain amount of flexibility depending on the situation you're in and the job you have and things like that. We tend to gravitate toward communication styles that match our positions and our needs at the time. The other is all of you have 4 scores, which means you have some piece of every color, unless you have a score of 0 in one of your colors. You are a mixture of all of those, and those characteristics, even with the lower scores, will come out from time to time. They aren't absent in you. So I'll turn it back to Cope and Angela.
I think Jack made an important point. I mean, if I have to organize grants for a living, and when I'm doing that, I can get really green. I create a table of completion, and I have ways of keeping track of everything because the job requires it. That's not how I'm naturally doing things. And if I'm out of work, I think outside of work, I tend to be a lot more red. But in work, I want to get work done, and I tend to be really blue. Angela, are you ready for these?
I am ready, and I totally agree with you, Cope. I pull on a different color characteristics depending on the situation and what I'm doing, whether I'm at work or at home.
Okay, next
Can
slide,
I add one
please.
more thing to the
Yes.
colors?
Sure.
Just because I did the same thing as Jack, but I added the people's names in the chat. And Kat and Salvador, you're our blues. Thank God for you, because I hate that. I'm not a blue at all. But thank God for the yellows, because that's my skill. I live there all day long. I'm almost orange with the red and yellow. But that was Anna. If you remember when we were just beginning, Anna had to call out and say, hey, hi, Angela, I know you. I haven't seen you for so long. So just a good example of another way to look at the colors too, just so personal and relationship building. But as CRPs, we're so glad you're red and green for the most part. So good to see. So thanks for letting me put my 2 cents in.
Sure. I'm going to just jump in here because it looks like we've got a couple of questions. So Rocky's asked a really interesting question, and I don't have a great answer for this, but how has COVID and working from home changed people's colors or impacted it? That's a great question, Rocky. And I don't have a good answer. I could maybe answer personally, but especially being a red person, I really miss the relationship piece of being at work. Go ahead, Jack.
So there are a couple things. If you think about what when you say, well, what has changed during COVID? Well, in terms of the colors, if you think about what it's done to us, well, Angela made one good point, which is you no longer face to face with people. So for those of you in the group that are, say, huggers, we have somebody on our CIS team who spends, she's got to be hugging people. And this has been extremely stressful for her. So that kind of interaction, if you need that, if that's really important to you, which we tend to see a little bit more in the reds and yellows, then you are really feeling the impact of the isolation much, much more than, say, the blues and greens. The other thing is we're having to do more by ourselves. we are having to pull out our non-dominant color characteristics and make them work because we don't have the same kind of interaction that we have had with people in the past. And so if you have if as you did this, if you have one color that has a really low number, then recognize that things that require you to operate in that color space, whether it's detail or something else, are going to be things that you're going to need help with. You're not going to be able to do very well. My example is, if you need to come up with a creative solution to something, then you better have a number in the yellows and reds that are high enough to allow you to do that. Because the blues and greens tend to be more concrete and much less creative. Vice versa, if you have part of your job that really requires a lot of detail, you are going to have to pull really hard on the characteristics that you have in the blue and green area to be able to get that done at a high quality level. So when you're working in a team and you have the opportunity to work together more, you can be more like your dominant color, and you can depend on other people to handle the things that are in your really low numbered colors. But if you're doing work alone, you've got to be able to balance that out. So that's probably the biggest impact that we see.
And Jack, Salvador has put a message in the comments because he's a chaplain and he's very blue. So Salvador, do you mind sharing how do you do it?
That's a great question. I have never thought about how I do it. I know that I sometimes can become impatient with my colleagues who are more holistic, more interpersonal, feeling based, and I think sometimes I also are experienced as too task oriented, too logical, too analytical about these things, and I guess practice a lot with them and surrounding myself with, or at least challenge myself to get out of my comfort zone is probably a way that I approach this. Try to understand where they're coming from and ask questions or clarifications when necessary, when there's miscommunication between us.
Great.
Awesome. I think the vignettes are here. Thanks for sharing, Salvador.
Yeah, I'm not sure how much it's related to Keller communication strategy and styles, but I find that for me with the pandemic, I have trouble building relationships. Well, I support all the pulmonary fellows and try to get them into research and help them do research. And I can't grab a cup of coffee and just go hang out with them, so they don't know who I am. And I only see them now on these Zoom meetings, and everybody turns their camera off, and there's no. It's hard to build rapport. So that's been the hardest thing for me during this pandemic and working from home. Anyway, I guess we could go on with the vignettes. If you want to give us the next slide, Stephanie. I assume that some of you might find these conversations sound a little familiar. We need a sample from the patient in room B for the ABC study, but I have to run these samples across the street. Can you help me out in Concenter? It's just a simple blood draw, 2 red tops.
Oh, hey, Cope. How was your weekend? You were going out of town, right?
Yeah, it was great. Can you take care of the consent and blood draw or not?
Sure, I can do it. I haven't been trained yet, but maybe Cheryl can help me if I have questions.
I added you to the protocol.
Yeah, but I haven't even seen the case report forms and nobody's trained me yet. But Cheryl's back from her trip and maybe she can show me some of her pictures.
All you have to do is go over the consent form and get the blood sample. It's not rocket medicine.
Okay. How much blood do you need?
2 tubes.
What do I do with the samples? Does it have to sit and clot? Can I put it in the fridge? Because I've got a patient in room C.
Why do you make everything so hard? Just consent and get the blood. I will be right back.
Why are you getting so mad at me? I'm sorry. I'm just trying to help.
So our first question we'd like to have people put in the chat, since we don't have the polls working, is what communication styles do you think these people are using, K and A? Any ideas? Any guesses?
Good guess. K blue, A red or yellow. Those are great. Those are great guesses. Yep. Yep. Good guess. And sometimes it is really difficult to tell because people are a mixture of the colors. So you know, it may not be clear if somebody's yellow or red, but you can kind of take a guess. So that was the next question. Who do you identify the most with in this slide? If you'll just put that in the chat really quick. All right. Great.
So good to hear. So good to see, since we have a lot of patient-facing people.
Yeah.
And you can see where I have some serious communication problems when I'm doing my work.
Yes, this is definitely a legit conversation. So next slide, please. All right. So go ahead. Sorry, Cope.
I was just gonna say, as you can see, the K tended to be more blue and A tended to show more red communication characteristics. I guess sorry, I'm trying to read the chat and talk at the same time and I can't do that. Next slide, please. So this is just a quick overview again of the general characteristics of people with red and blue communication styles. The next thing we'd like to ask is, next slide, please. What do you think people could have done now that you know a little bit about communication strategies? What could K and A take into consideration to improve their communication with somebody else? Please put your suggestions in the chat. If you feel like you want to talk about it, unmute yourself.
Please don't be shy.
Provide adequate details.
Yeah. Be polite. Don't be so dang rushed. I could listen better. I could address the concerns and not be so abrupt. As you see, when I'm abrupt, it comes off as aggressive, mean, and rude. So I really try to temper that.
Ask all the questions in one message for A. That's true. Yep. Get it all together because somebody who's a blue communicator just needs to get it done, and they need to get it done quickly.
Yeah, see, if I had handed A the CRF, maybe that would have been a little nicer than just saying, go grab that stuff.
Yeah, I couldn't have made the excuse that I hadn't seen them before if you handed it to me.
Now, to be fair, my weekends are usually epic, but
that's awesome. These are all great suggestions. Yeah, good deal.
I'd be curious to know how many times people have used those suggestions.
That is a good question, Jack. Yeah, I did see ones, not take a K personally and ask, why are you mad at me? And that's very true. Like being a red communicator and with dealing with a blue communicator, they take things really personally. And so understanding that Cope's just trying to get something done and just wants some help and is by no means trying to be mean or is mad goes a long way in helping this conversation.
See, and let me just add that frequently what happens in a situation like that is, in this scenario, there was a bit of a detour in that there was some need and request for clarification. If you feel like the person you're interacting with is being aggressive toward you, then you really don't want to continue the conversation. So rather than get clarification and prolong the conversation, often what takes place is you do whatever you can to get out of the conversation, even if you needed more information to do it correctly.
And to build on what Jack's point, that's very true. And being a red communicator, that's very likely to happen because you value harmony and you want to make sure everybody's okay. So it's even more, and you avoid conflict. So it's even more likely that maybe the red person might not even ask the questions that they need and just try to figure it out.
And Aaron makes a good point in the chat that I didn't actually listen to Angela's concerns. I was just like, I know how to do this. She should know how to do this. It's not hard. Do it. But
Yeah.
I wasn't listening to the fact that there were concerns.
That's a good point. So we have another vignette to go through, but we only have about 10 minutes, and Jack has some wrap up slides. So question, do we want to go through the vignette, or do we want to go ahead and skip the second one? Because this was some great conversation and didn't want to cut this short. So Cope, do you have a thought on that?
I think we should do the vignettes. I think
All right,
that's
let's
helpful.
do it. Let's do it then. Next slide.
All right. What's wrong?
Oh, it's Zelda. She went home and didn't put all the patient information into RedCap before she left.
She'll do it in the morning. She always does.
Data are supposed to be entered as soon as possible so we don't make mistakes. She does this all the time.
Well, you know she has to leave by 4:30 every day. Maybe she'll do it tomorrow, or she might just do it when she gets home. If you're really worried about it, maybe you could do it.
She needs to organize herself better. The data are supposed to be entered immediately. We can't afford to make mistakes.
It's not that big a deal. Are you okay?
I just think she needs to do her job. You're always taking her side. Okay, next slide, please. Oh, I was going to, yeah, there we go, poll 4. So what do we think about these guys? Cope and Angela in this scenario. What colors are represented here? Yellow, red, and green. Yep. Good job, guys.
So you guys are showing that you're pretty good at figuring out people's communication strategies.
Yeah, that's exactly right. Yellow and green. So who do you identify more with in this scenario? Green, awesome.
Here comes all the greens.
Yeah.
Bring it on, green. Just
You got to
kidding.
pull that. You got to pull that yellow person back and.
Come on, Anna Bartles and Stephanie Shookman. Oh, there you go. Salvador's with us.
Yeah, we got to keep.
And Madison. Oh, Madison, you went back to green.
Well, it's good though, because it's a good mix, right? So
Right.
Green people are going to make sure that the details are caught, and the yellow folks are going to be charging ahead and seeing the whole picture and being visionary stuff. So it works out. So next slide, please. This is just another overview of green and yellow and sort of what the characteristics are of those. Let's move on to the next one. All right, let's think about what could happen with this conversation if the yellow and the green communicator kind of understood where the other person was coming from a bit better. Feel free to put it in the chat.
How do you greens work with these yellows and reds and blues? One thing I think it's important to point out is that you can't affect other people's communication styles. You can actually only affect your own. So trying to change other people is not worth the time.
That's a good point, Krista. Understanding that Zelda will do it eventually, and trust her to do that. I think I didn't quite catch all of yours, but use a different word choice instead of asking what's wrong. That's a good point. Kay could hear out A's side a bit more. I love it. Green should understand the world will not implode overnight with the data not being in yet. It'll likely be done within the next 24 hours and all will be well.
Well, that's great. I think we can go on to Jack's section.
Yes, we do need to go on it. Great conversation.
I need to be able to share the screen
All right.
or something like that.
There you go.
All right, there I go. Wherever that is. Okay, so in time we got left, I want to cover just a couple of things. One is there are two things going on with the scenarios. One is allowing you to be the audience and taking a look and getting a sense of, yep, I can see that. Yep, I can see that. But it's very different when you're in the middle of it. That's one. The other is even when you are in the middle of it and you understand, you know, what's the plan for moving forward? How do you diffuse it? So it's one thing to do it here on the screen remotely where you can type in the chat what the clever solution is, and there were some great solutions. When you're in the middle of those conversations, it's a little bit more challenging. So it's really all about having some tools, having some strategies that you can go to very quickly to get done what you need to have done. So I want to start by saying, look, your goal is to get the blood draw, get it done on time. And your goal is to get things entered when you need it entered. And so that's where, if you can get to the end point, and you can do it without extra stress, without extra problems dealing with another person, and without creating an issue with relationships or working styles. Then that's what you want to do. So what I'm going to put up, what I have up here, is it's actually a workshop that we do on crucial conversations, but it's also a book. So here it is. And basically, it has a strategy that uses a series of pretty straightforward steps to allow you to recognize when you have a really less than optimal conversation and to put some things in place that allow you to pretty quickly get to where you want to go in a way that reduces the stress and it reduces the confrontation and allows both you to leave feeling like you've gotten what you want and the other person to leave feeling like that they have gotten what they need or what they want. So it is a 6-step process, and we don't have time to go into it, but we do offer workshops in this, and it might be something that you would consider taking a look at. So particularly, I want to just emphasize, that one of the big steps is to use this what they call state, STATE, to be able to immediately change the conversation to make it safer, to make it more neutral, and to diffuse any tension that might be there to get to where you need to go. So again, we don't have time to go into the details, except what I want to say is there are strategies. There are specific strategies that you can learn and employ very quickly and very genuinely. This isn't like mind control. This is allowing you to get to where you need to go without that confrontation with a communication style that's very different than yours. So with that, we are nearing the end here, and I'm going to turn it back to Stephanie primarily, who will get us through the wrap up and some references that we have that you might find useful.
Yes, and if you could start with does anybody have any questions? That's what we need to start with. So let me get that back up there. And please, go ahead, Angela.
Sorry, Stephanie. Also, if you would like a copy of the PDF of the communication style survey, and you weren't able to download it for whatever reason on RedCap, if it didn't work for you or whatever, please put your email in the chat, and we'll just shoot you an email with a PDF of that survey tool.
Oh, thanks. Thanks, Cope, for putting yes. Thank you, Cope. That's what I was trying to do too. So if you could take the survey, but does anybody have any questions that you want to unmute yourself? Nobody? The meeting PDF will be sent for today. What's the meeting PDF? Is that is something, Krista, is that something for the specific meeting?
So we
Oh, you mean, oh, I'm sorry, the yes, sorry, the PDF for the communications assessment. Yes.
yeah, and we can send those out with, like, we do a tip of the month, which I'll email you guys about in a minute afterwards, but we can send all the stuff out with that as well.
Okay, great.
Yeah, we can send it out with the tip of the month, and the meeting is going to be recorded, and Stephanie will get it over to the folks at CCHMC that can post it.
Yes, and Bliss, I do see that you want me to put the first slide up again, which I can certainly do. Chris, if you wouldn't mind putting that information in the chat, that would be great. So thank you so much for coming. Just some more information about our other workshops that we'll be hosting. And so just to give you an idea, if you're not signed up for CCTST emails, let me know, and I'm happy to send you an email to get you signed up so that you receive the emails that tell you when our upcoming workshops, our team science workshops are be coming, and you can get a chance to register for them as well. And the same thing for getting the slides. That's when you'll be able to get all these links, because I know it's hard to see these links or see them, but not click on them. So we're happy to share these slides as well. And a recording will be shared with you. Here's the membership as well. And a recording will be added to our CTR online. So here, let me get back to this activity, the text and the activity code, so that you get your attendance marked for children's. So we will be adding this recording to our CCTST website. I know that I'll be sharing this with Mina as well. So your normal, if you're a children's CRP, the normal way that you access these events will be available as well shortly. Any comments?
Yeah, I just want to say
questions?
that in situations like this, in presentations like this, where we are cramming things that sometimes are presented in 2-hour or longer activity sessions, we're running through things rather quickly, and so if you missed something or you felt that you would like to know more about something, this topic, along with a lot of other very similar topics, are offered throughout the year as more expanded, more in-depth 2-hour workshops. And if you all get together and decide that you would like more details or more information about a particular part of this, please let us know, and we're happy to come back and try to decompress some of the components that we went through today.
And that is it from us, unless you have any other. The link to the evaluation is definitely in the chat. I can show it again. And then thanks to Cope, she edited it to the chat. So make sure, if you don't mind, thanks Cope for sending that again. If everyone would take 1 to 2 minutes, not that long, to add your suggestions or how you felt we did, and just tell us what you think.
Thanks, everybody. Have a great day.
Thank you.
Thank you, everybody.
Have a great day.
Thank you.
So the team science team's going to stay on?
Sure.